You sign up the client, you take those initial payments, you do the work, you do a good job, then the client calls you. We don't want you anymore, and we're calling our credit card company to dispute the charges. How can we successfully fight them and fight credit card chargebacks? Today on the podcast.
This is the Wedding Industry Law Podcast, a podcast dedicated to wedding professionals that are just trying to keep it legal. And now, your host, Rob Shank.
Hey out there, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Rob. I'm going to be your host today as we talk about fighting credit card chargebacks when clients have essentially disputed your work in some form or another, whether it's because of quote unquote fraud that you've committed, or maybe through a breach of contract that you've allegedly committed. They've started the chargeback process. How do we fight that? How can we get our money from our merchant services provider? All that on today's podcast with guest Nina the lawyer. But before we get into it, one ask, please like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get it. Even better, mosey on over to the YouTube channel of Wedding Industry Law, like and subscribe there, hit the notification bell, maybe leave a comment or two. If you have suggestions for content, you got something that you want to see, you got something that's really grinding your gears, let me know. I will address it in a future episode. Today, talking about them chargebacks though. We don't do that alone. We have a guest, Nina Marinaro, the attorney, aka Nina the lawyer, is going to discuss this concept with us because she not only counsels her clients on this process, but recently was involved in it herself. So she's got some great firsthand knowledge about it. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Nina, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Nina, it's just one of those things, I don't know, like the planets are aligned or what, I don't know, maybe I drew the right lotto numbers, but I have been searching for someone to have on this show to talk about chargebacks. And it just so happened, and this is the power of social media, the power of Instagram, even for me, I don't know how to use these platforms correctly, but I clicked on a story or something and you were talking about your own personal experience with a chargeback. And I was like, man, please come on my show. And you were so gracious and so nice to spend some time with me to talk about your experience with chargeback. So I really appreciate it. But as I mentioned it at the top of the show, this is not simply because of your personal experience with chargebacks, but you are an attorney, you're an awesome attorney. But for the uninitiated, can you kind of talk about who you are, who you represent, and what you do?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So I am an attorney licensed in New York, but I run not only my law firm, but also a digital contract template shop for typically service-based providers in the consulting fields. And through that, it's more of a passive shop, right? So people are free to come on and buy the templates whenever they want, but I actually experienced my very first chargeback, which is something that ironically I am constantly coaching people through my content about, and I'm constantly telling my audience what to do if they're faced with a chargeback. So I found it very serendipitous and, a learning lesson that I was faced with a chargeback as well, but I felt fully prepared to handle it. So as far as, a little bit background, even before that, I was a lobbyist in New York City, and I dealt a lot with contracts for a lot of real estate developers and various business owners, a lot of restaurants and things like that. So contracts is sort of my bread and butter. It's what I've had exponential experience with through just my clients' situations. But now I have my very first experience with it as well. So I hopped live, like Robert mentioned, and I talked about how I was able to fight that chargeback with Stripe. And I'm sure we'll get into that during this episode.
That's right. So thank you so much for that. And just so everybody understands, I'll have all of Nina's information in the show notes. If you want to go check out her website and all the services that she has to offer, it will be all in there. So Nina, I also mentioned at the top of the show that, it's a common occurrence in which a wedding or an event vendor, goes through the motions, has the contract, takes whatever their non-refundable payment is, maybe does a little bit of the services, walkthroughs, whatever the case may be, depending on if they're DJ or planner, whatever it is. And then maybe the couple breaks up, which is, there's a high percentage of those that happen. And then they, in order to get the money back, they do a chargeback. And so there's an issue with that, with the credit card, accepting credit card payments. So from the very top, can you kind of walk us through, from a technical standpoint, what is a chargeback? Like what are the processes that are happening for a chargeback to occur?
Awesome. So not awesome that that's happening, but awesome question.
Right. Awesome.
So, right. So, people just will try anything to get their way, to be right, and they don't even realize that it might amount to fraud. So what a chargeback is someone, the customer or the client will, if they can't get their money back from you directly, or maybe they won't even ask you, they won't even go to you first, they'll just say, oh, you know what, it's fine. Or someone will tell them, oh, it's fine, just tell your credit card company it was fraud, or just fight it with your bank. So they'll go directly to their bank or their credit card company, and they'll dispute the charge directly with the third party. And they're not doing their due diligence. They're going to issue the chargeback, meaning give them a refund. And then it's up to you to dispute that. So I work with a lot of online entrepreneurs who are online service-based providers, or a lot of people who have passive products, kind of like my templates. So it becomes even more risky and difficult because, you're not meeting the person face-to-face. You might not have them with a clear signature on a contract, but even so, it's still possible to fight it. I personally use Stripe as a payment processor to accept credit card payments. And they immediately notify me of a chargeback, and they give me an opportunity to submit evidence and dispute it. I know also people might use PayPal or things like that to accept payments, but that's pretty dangerous when you're dealing with a situation like a chargeback, because PayPal, from what I've heard from clients, isn't great at all in terms of letting you dispute that payment. So it's actually better when someone pays with a credit card or even a debit card, because I don't think debit cards, it's like as easy for them to get the chargeback process. Credit cards, generally the credit card company will just say, okay, must be fraud, or whatever the heck they do between them and their customer. So credit card companies are actually the easiest to issue the payment back to them, the chargeback. PayPal also does that, but credit card companies, at least you have the ability to fight it and submit your evidence.
So that I think if I heard you correctly, when the client in their client brain has decided that they are going to get that money back somehow, they process at some point at the beginning on their side is to tell the merchant services provider, which is, PayPal or Visa or MasterCard, or I don't know, American Diners Club, whatever the case is. They have I guess and I mean, I'm sure they're all different, but I guess in the process, they are presented with an option of like a drop-down menu that says, is it fraud? Is it a dispute about what services were provided? Is it a breach of contract? Is it something like that, where they have to tell the merchant services provider why exactly they're wanting the money back?
That's a good question. And I don't fully know the answer, because I'm sure it depends on the institution that, issued like whether it's a bank or whatever, the credit card company. I'm sure they all have their own processes, but I can tell you from my experience, when I received the chargeback notification through Stripe, the person had claimed it was fraud. But I, of course, had a signed contract. And so their claiming that it is fraud is the fraud from my perspective,
That
because you
makes sense.
signed a contract, you used the product. I have proof that you downloaded it and whatever. So maybe they're fraudulently saying it's fraud because they know that that's the easiest, quickest thing. So that's what I usually see through even my clients' eyes as well, because I always counsel them on it.
So yeah, that in my anecdotal evidence, at least there, I've been involved with some chargebacks. Of course, this was, I mean, I'm an old man now at this point, you know, maybe this might have been 15 years ago, but this is back when people would take payments with credit card over the phone. And so
Right.
that's been my, that was when I was my first-hand account representing a client through this process. It was actually a liquor store, selling thousands of dollars worth of liquor over the phone. But anyway, that's for another day. But anyway, it did seem at that point in the process that you could indicate why it is that it's being done. And I guess fraud obviously is one example of when the chargeback process can be started. Like that's the reason why. But in some of my clients, I feel like there's a culpability level less than that. Like I feel like sometimes it might be like, I just didn't get all the flowers that I had ordered, or these people are not providing me with planning services that I thought were up to snuff, and that is what it is, or something along those lines. Um, but at any rate, I don't want to get too technical in the weeds on that. I just that was kind of like a, okay, well, it made me scratch my head for a second. So we kind of have an understanding of the chargeback process, how it starts. Can you walk us through your experience? And I, it's my understanding that you were successful in fighting it. And so can you kind of share with the audience some of the things that you did that allowed you to kind of win out?
Yeah, of course. And so, just for full transparency, I don't find out the final decision. They said it takes, I think, up to 60 days or 90 days, but I was able to review with Stripe, again, the like processor for the credit cards, what their criteria were. And I know that I hit all of the points. So I'm expecting to be successful. And I've had clients who I've counseled be successful in the past with similar situations. So I'll go back to the beginning and kind of give my little rundown of what happened. So again, I have a template shop on my website. Passive, they can pay all at once. They can pay via payment plan. And probably the first red flag to me was that this person paid via payment plan. And by the time the second payment was coming up, it failed. So that was an initial red flag for me to watch out for this account. And when I went to visit to see, how much, and of course I know it's different. You guys are mostly brick and mortar businesses, it seems like, with tangible services. But, document everything you're doing, because I was able to see that she downloaded 37 out of the 39 files on the platform, all on the first day that she purchased the program, which is something that people just don't do. They don't download 39 contract templates the first day unless they're trying to fraud me. So that was the first red flag that I saw to prevent this from happening a second time. So I knew that something was going to go on, and I was okay with it. If they don't pay the second and third payment, whatever, I'm going to restrict their access, and that'll be the end of it. So I took a screenshot of their progress, how the product was delivered to them, and I deleted them from the program. Then, sure enough, I get a notification from Stripe that not only did they not pay the second and third payment they owed me, but also they then claimed that the first payment was fraud, which obviously,
That's
if you're accessing 40 of my files, it's not fraud. You used it. I'm sorry, I think I froze for a second.
that's okay. It came through.
Okay. Yeah. So from that point, then they immediately issued the refund to them plus a $15 fee. And that is what ticked me off the most. I was like, okay, it's all right. If you're going to steal from me, that's one thing. But if I'm going to be in the negative now for it, $15, that is not okay with me. And I'm going to fight that. Right. So I was able to Google. Unfortunately, on Stripe's page, it's not, they give you a clear walkthrough of what kind of information you need to submit, which I'll get to in a second. But on that same page where they lead you to dispute the charge, they don't have all of their criteria listed on there. So I did a quick Google search and I found an info page on how you can fight, like what elements you need to show in order to be successful. And here's what they were from my recollection. You needed to show, to beat fraud at least, that there was a contract, that it was signed, and that the product was delivered or accessed or whatever. So I had a screenshot of them logging in to my program, which was on a third-party website. So they would have had to take an extra step after paying to log in to a separate website. I had a screenshot of how much of the product they accessed to show that it was delivered. One of those just would have been sufficient perspective. I also had a screenshot of the contract that was on the checkout page. It was kind of like a terms and conditions they just click and agree to. And instead of a signature, the very first paragraph has contract language that says something very clear that by clicking I agree or by clicking buy now, you are agreeing to all the terms in the contract and you're executing a legally binding document. Then I also took a screenshot of the refund policy and the chargeback policy within that contract, because as you upload documents to Stripe, it will ask you for basic information, your little side of the story, not all of the facts of the matter, but the facts of why it wasn't fraud, like what evidence you're attaching. And then it'll give you a drop-down menu to show what you're attaching as far as a PDF or a screenshot or whatever. So, when I uploaded the access to Podia, which is what I use to store the contracts, the drop-down menu item I selected was product delivery. Of course, if you're a flower arranger, you can show that. I would definitely document and take pictures of the flower arrangements or whatever you're doing before you deliver them to your clients. Like, make that a standard practice and keep that information on file for, several months or a year or whatever until that period has passed. So that you can show this is the product delivery, right? So then I selected that on the drop-down menu. Then they had a section where you can upload a copy of your refund policy, upload a copy of your contract. But here's the thing, you can't just show, on a Word document or on a Google document, your refund policy. It has to be clear that it was the actual contract that they agreed to. Either they signed it, in your cases, since you do a lot of tangible services, you would have even better proof, because I would imagine you would have a signature versus a checkbox like I had. But if you do have a checkbox situation where it's kind of like a checkout page and they click I agree, have a screenshot of that contract on the checkout page to show that it was related to that service or product that they purchased. You're also able to upload proof like client communications. So I uploaded a screenshot that I reached out to her about her missing payment first, and stuff like that. But really, the only elements you needed to prove per Stripe's fraud, whatever, guidance, was the contract, that it was signed, and that the product was delivered.
If I understand correctly, Nina, is this a situation in which this person was not someone saying someone stole my credit card and used my credit? It might have downloaded your contracts, but they did it with my credit card. So in other words, it's like that person frauded you, but I did not. It wasn't that kind of situation. It was literally the person just wanted free stuff. I mean, is that kind of what your understanding is? Like, I know.
Yes.
I know that my bank, I don't know if my bank is like, like if the Russians are targeting it, but somebody is using my debit card all the time. I feel like I get a new debit card or new credit card every other week. Like, they call me and go, Rob, we noticed that, somebody bought 8 chicken sandwiches at Chick-fil-A, and I've never eaten a Chick-fil-A in my life. So no, that's not me. Thank you. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know if this is like a Chick-fil-A sandwich situation for you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because the second red flag that I should have noticed was that the name that they used at checkout was different than the email. So the name that they used at checkout was like Sharon, and then the email was, to me, it looks like a fake email, because it was like Ricardo Dorman plus sign, like a plus sign 322 and then a bunch of numbers, like who has a plus sign in their email? I don't know. So I was very confused. Usually I also make sure that I personally thank people when they purchase from me, and I couldn't find their Instagram account. That's why I really think that for your audience base, it will be even easier for them because they have at least some kind of face-to-face interaction, I would imagine. And
Right.
also they have, I would imagine, like an actual signature. So they'll be in an even better position. So just make sure that you're checking that the name on the card matches, or that you have like a credit card authorization contract as well. So maybe a one-page like addendum to your contract that authorizes you to charge the card. And if it's a payment plan, it will authorize you to charge it more than once without a separate authorization each time. So you guys are even in a better position than me, because I actually don't know whether it was someone just trying to like fraudulently claim it was fraud and come against me, or if someone stole their credit card. But either way, like you mentioned, I'm not the one who frauded you. And from what I understand with past clients' experiences with Stripe is very generous to the vendor. And if that's a situation where someone else frauded them and stole their credit card, that's up to the bank and the bank's security and the bank to eat that cost,
That's
not me
exactly
as the
right.
service provider.
That's exactly right. I was about to say, like,
Right.
yeah, that's, you rendered a product, you rendered a service. So that's not on you in either way on those situations. So just to stress the audience out there, don't worry about that. But as Nina mentioned, you're 99% of the time you're face to face, eyeball to eyeball, grill to grill with somebody. So it's probably not going to be a situation unless they're the most ballsy, con artist grifter in the world to can use somebody else's credit card over the
Right.
course of a year or whatever. Um, so if I understand correctly, one of the principal things I got from fighting these chargebacks is, aside from having a contract, which is, that's, come on, let's gotta have a contract, right? But having the contract, making sure your contract, if possible, has the signature on it of the client, even if it's an e-signature, that's probably okay. Making sure that you have your package, your service package, that details what you do, somehow integrated into that, and then your refund policy integrated into that somehow. Most of the time, people's liquidated damages clauses, the non-refundable payments, are usually in the contract, so that's good. And then what I heard you say, which I think was really smart, is if you are in a product category within the service, within the wedding industry, like if you're a florist, if you do stationery, if you have a tangible product, is to take a picture of the tangible product, um, as extra
Mhm.
evidence that it was supplied. So
Right.
this was an instance in which there was fraud. This person is, at least as we understand it, saying, I never got it, or it's maybe somebody stole my credit card. In my anecdotal experience, when someone is doing a chargeback for anything other than fraud,
Mhm.
it seems to me that the merchant services provider, and again, I'm not holding Nina to this, don't hold me to it. In my anecdotal evidence of this, the credit card company does not want to get involved in a breach of contract action. In other words, the the credit card company is not going to adjudicate whether or not you did a good job planning somebody's wedding. As
Right.
long as there was a contract, and as long as you did something, and you can prove that you have a contract, you've taken the screenshot, or you've provided them with evidence, then the chargeback will fail. And what the merchant service provider is going to do is tell the parties, my name is Paul, and that's between y'all. I mean, if the client wants to sue you, they can do that, but I'm not going to be in the middle of that. So that's kind of my
Exactly.
thing. So,
Yeah.
um, so other than document, what is there any other, is there any other kind of actionable nuggets that somebody can take with the chargeback process? I guess maybe be communicative right at the start, or
Yeah. So one thing that I did, and I'm glad I added to my contracts after I have, I have the privilege, as do you, of learning from our clients' experiences and mistakes and, amending things in the future. So one thing that I've noticed after this chargeback trend was happening a lot in the online space is I baked in a clause into the payment section of my contract templates, which I use my contract templates for my products as well. So what I added into the contract was a chargeback clause that essentially says, if in the event of a chargeback, we reserve the right to report that to your credit bureau. Because this puts people on notice, and especially, there's often situations that happen where that the person's stealing from you or whatever because they really need the money. However, if someone needs the money that bad that they're going to fraudulently, issue a chargeback or try to just get the money back from you in that way, that's going to damage their credit score. And I would hate to see someone who does, quote unquote, need the money more than you damage their own ability to get future money through being approved for credit and things like that. So that's something that I did. I don't think most people really understand the implications of that, but I was happy that I was able to bring that up even in my dispute with Stripe and say that, not only do they owe me for this money that they disputed, but they also owe me for the payments they haven't made. And the fact that I reserve the right per the contract to report this to the credit bureau, it's going to hurt their credit score even more than just this $400 that they stole from me, in so many words. So that is one thing that I think if you can find a nice way to explain that to people, it can, or put people on notice, it can really make people think twice before doing that.
That makes absolute sense. Nina, you have been a gold mine of useful information with chargebacks, and we super appreciate it for you coming on the show. And if anyone has a question or maybe wants one of your contract templates or wants to reach out to you, how can they do that? What's the best way they can get a hold of Nina?
So great question. I spend a lot of my time giving free content and free little nuggets of information on Instagram, and my Instagram is @NinaTheLawyer. And I'm always open to DMs. Of course, I don't give legal advice in the DMs, but never hurts to just reach out. And if I have content or a resource that can point you in the right direction, I'm happy to provide that.
And is there a website for the contract templates?
Yes, it's my first name and last name. So ninamarinaro.com/templates, and you can find my template shop there. It is mostly for those online interactions. So if you're a wedding planner who coaches other wedding planners, or if you're a photographer who does online, stuff, or if you're hiring an independent contractor, I have templates for all that stuff. But again, it never hurts to just check out, see what resources that I can provide you with, and I'm always open to meeting more people, so hope to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nina.
Thank you.
Again, all of Nina's information is going to be in the show notes. So I super duper encourage you to go check out what she's having to offer. And as she mentioned, she's on the Instagram. She's pretty prolific on there. Lots of great information. I'm not just talking about cat pictures, but she actually drops a lot of knowledge in her Instagram stories or her feed or whatever they're calling it. One day I will learn it, but by the time I learn it, it'll be on to the next thing. But anyway, go check her out there in the show notes. Again, if you are enjoying the content of the Wedding Industry Law Podcast, then please, by all means, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Go check us out on YouTube. Leave a comment while you're there. Maybe subscribe, hit the notification bell. And with that, folks, we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wedding Industry Law Podcast. This podcast is intended for general information only. Nothing in this podcast is intended to be legal advice. Do not rely on this podcast for your legal matter. Instead, consult an attorney in your area. Thanks, obrigada, até semana que vem.